So be inspired and be spiritually refreshed today at today's Power Luncheon with our guest speaker, Brian Faulkner. And as we prepare for Brian in sharing, I am so thankful to announce that this video sponsorship has been put together by our friend Richard Bruton. Thank you, Richard. And so Richard Bruton of Bruton Financial Investments with the National Bank Financial Wealth Management is here, and thank you for your sponsorship. What he says, stress-free investing with a team you know and trust. I just borrowed that from you, okay? So thank you very much, Richard. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian. Brian, do you want me to start off with a little bit of the background on what you shared with us?
Just do whatever you do, Sean.
Okay. Well, Brian's a seasoned business leader with over 30 years experience in the global engineering and construction industry. In 2014, Brian left the corporate world to start his own business consulting practice, BKF Consulting. He's presently principal consultant at Thrive State Incorporated, which was established in 2019 in partnership with his daughter Jackie to help business leaders create positive and sustainable change so that their business and the people working in it can thrive. I love that, thriving. Brian's a happy husband of 44 years and a proud father and grandfather. And I'm going to just stop there because I think you can tell the rest of the story, Brian. I was so excited to be introduced to you, having no idea, wow, the amazing threads and tapestry that God, put in place to bring you to our region to be able to share your story here today. So Brian, take it away.
When you asked me about doing this, I said, you realize I'm an engineer, right? Because engineers are kind of known for being low-key, steady Eddie, boring type people. And I've been told that you can tell when a fashion trend is ending when engineers start to pick it up. So, but anyway, so Sean said, no, don't worry, there'll be lots of caffeine in the room. So please avail yourself of that if you need to. So yeah, as Sean mentioned, I'm currently principal consultant at Thrive State, and my daughter is the president and principal consultant. So we set it up with her as the boss, best boss I ever had. And we both have a real passion for helping people. What we do is kind of two prongs to it. She focuses on workplace culture, employee engagement, conflict resolution, all those kinds of things. My area is more around operational process improvement. I do quite a bit of strategic planning facilitation and some coaching. So, and again, if I'm not going to sell anything today, but just to say, if you want tomorrow to look different than today, give us a call. How many of you here today were raised on a farm? Okay, so I got some friends in the house. Yeah, I was born into a farm family near Listowel. I'm actually the youngest of 10 kids. I have 8 older sisters and 1 older brother, so we were severely outnumbered. I often think I'm kind of like Joseph, you think a youngest kid is spoiled. Well, Joseph, look what happened to him. But in 1955, my mother was expecting with her 9th child, and I guess my father and her had decided and agreed with the doctor that while she was in the hospital having my youngest sister, they would do a little procedure to stop the baby train. That was in the era when you actually stayed in the hospital for a couple days when you had a baby. But my mom got phlebitis during that pregnancy, which is like a blood clot in your system. It foiled the plan. And so the baby train continued, and two and a half years later, I arrived. And then the baby train ended. So I think that's a very early example in my life of how, God has his plans, and when we submit our ways to him, he brings good. Well, hopefully my mother thinks it's good out of bad situation. She's long past now, but so I grew up in a very devout Christian home. My parents, dedicated Christians. They had us in that little Pentecostal church in Drayton anytime the doors were open, and we were like 25% of the congregation. So, if we were away, which we never were, because you can't really go anywhere with that many kids. And they weren't perfect parents. We were talking earlier how, what is appropriate as parenting changes over time. So they were old school. But, they did something right, because all 10 of their kids grew up to serve the Lord, and like 100% success rate. So that to me is very remarkable. Now, it didn't look like that at every step along the way, but in adulthood, that's where we landed. I'm going to disappoint you, because I don't have a dramatic conversion story, like, how God rescued me from drug addiction and things like that. I actually can't remember, honestly, I cannot remember a time when I didn't believe. I was just groomed from my mother's knee in faith, and I believed it. I believed in God and in Christ as my Savior. But in my teenage years, we had many youth rallies and that kind of thing. And in those youth rallies, there seemed to be a focus on surrender. Surrendering your life, giving your life to God. And more than once, I remember responding to an altar call of surrender, giving my life over to Christ. And I probably assumed that this meant I was going to be a minister, because if you give your life to God, He's going to make you be a minister, right? And I had 3 of my older siblings are in full-time ministry. My brother was a missionary, and so it's kind of where my expectations were at the time. But there was a verse in Proverbs 3, 5 and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." I really took that to heart, to say, okay, God, my heart is going to be after you. Whatever you want to do, I'm up for it. But this is kind of what I thought it was going to look like. If you look at the top half of that little graph there, I thought, well, it's a straight path. God's going to make a straight path for me, and this is going to be wonderful. But in actuality, you can never put God in a box, and He's too amazing for that. And instead, He had a plan that was way more interesting and challenging and fulfilling, actually, than anything I could have ever imagined. It actually ended up with me not becoming a minister. I became an engineer. So pivotal year was 1976. It was pivotal on 2 counts. First count was I was finishing high school, and I had done really well in like maths and sciences and things. And I had some scholarship money to spend. So the counselor said, "Well, you should think about engineering." I said, "I don't even know what an engineer does or is or anything, but I'll check it out." So I did a couple of open houses and applied to some schools and got accepted. So I started off to engineering school. And I think that's one of the first examples of commit your ways to the Lord and He'll direct your steps, because it was the perfect career for me. It was so well suited to who I am as a person and my capabilities. So that was the first dramatic thing in '76. The other one was I met a girl. And some of you know her. Her name was Penny. We were at a youth retreat at a little camp called Camp Ambassador outside of Owen Sound. And they had a little tiny skating rink there, like a roller skating rink. And I was a terrible skater. They had a boys skate and a girls skate. When the boys skate came, I did a fantastic wipeout right in front of her. And she was a semi-pro skater, dancing around out there on her skates. So I asked her to help me up. She did. asked her to skate with me, and we skated like the rest of the session, and really hit it off. And then 2 years later, kind of contrary to popular wisdom, you don't get married halfway through university and when you're only like 20-ish years old, but we did, and it was great. And it's been a partnership that has lasted, and next week will be our 44th wedding anniversary. So, and there again, I just see that as God orchestrating the right thing because of a sincere heart that was after him. So that was it. That was big stuff in 76. Then the next really crucial, pivotal year was 1981. I was coming out of university. I was debating, academia versus practical engineering, and leaning personally towards academia a bit, like wanted to do a master's and who knows what after that. But Penny really made the decision for me. She said, well, we're having a baby. I said, okay, I'm getting a job. So I started looking for work and landed a job as an engineer in training with a company called Fenco. Fenco at the time was like the premier engineering company in Canada. It was a dream job, just amazing. And there's a whole story about that as well, how that all happened, which I won't go into at all. But I started working downtown 1 Yonge Street in the Toronto Star building. So here's this country kid, like who'd been in Toronto like 5 times in his life, kind of thing. And I'm getting off the subway and going down to 1 Yonge Street. I was pinching myself every day, and then doing the kind of amazing work that I'd always hoped would be what I had imagined engineering could turn into. So it was great. It was awesome. But I had a very quick awakening to the difference between academia and practical engineering. One of my very first bosses was a guy named Klaus, German engineer, very by the book and, tough guy kind of thing. But he was a great mentor. And he said to me, Brian, if you got 95% on your exams in school, you thought you were the bee's knees, like you thought you were really doing it. He says, if 5% of your structures fall down, you're a disaster. And so he really nailed it for me that this is the real world now. It's not just academia. And so my career after that, and I'm not going to belabor all the things that happened in my career. We'll be here till tomorrow morning. It was basically, I could divide my career into 4 decades. So the first decade was like working as a practicing engineer, learning the trade, designing things, watching them get built. And then the next decade was more managing engineering and projects that were being built. And then the third decade was managing business. So you're kind of moving from, the stuff that's getting done in the projects, but actually, managing the business to make sure it goes well. And then the last decade has been about mentoring and mentoring leaders for other businesses and organizations, not just businesses. And I got to tell you, it's been an amazing ride. My career has taken me to every continent except Antarctica. I became a partner in one of the largest engineering firms in Canada. And we were acquired by an Australian company named Worley in 2007. I kept working there with them for another 7 years. And my last corporate job was responsible for Canadian operations. So we had 6 business lines reporting into me with a top line of about $2.5 billion and 12,000 employees. So it was a significant opportunity. And again, if I thought about what my dreams or what I imagined as a farm kid, none of that would ever have crossed my mind. It was way more like the bottom slide up there. And you might say, well, that sounds that sounds pretty much like that top line, doesn't it? It just all happened. Oh, no, it wasn't like that at all. It was kind of repeatedly getting thrown off the deep end of the swimming pool and told, can you swim, you know? And I'll just give you one example, but these are the kinds of things that just happened over and over. It was in 1988, I was asked to take a position in Sault Ste. Marie. They had a little office there, and I had been like working as a junior/intermediate engineer in a big office in Toronto. And I went to this little office where there were 10 people, and I was it, right? So I had to, you know, sell the jobs, design the jobs, do the jobs, manage the draftsman and junior engineer and so on, and basically did almost everything. It was an opportunity that you get in that smaller context that you don't often get in a bigger context. So it was an amazing experience, but challenging. And I can remember, I'm a pretty severe introvert by nature, and so, you know, my first few visits going into Algoma Steel to sell to a client in there, and I'd stop at the house on the way with Penny and say, like, just have a little word of prayer here because I'm a bit nervous about this, and we'd pray together. She took a sabbatical from the bank when the kids were little, and then she worked all together about 30 years at the bank. But God blessed it, you know, and we grew and in many ways during that time. But I hadn't even finished 2 years there, and I got a call from Toronto saying, we want you to come back. We've got a project in Turkey. It's like a subway system, heavy rail mass rapid transit system. We want you to be the civil lead. So it's a heavy civil project. So being the civil lead was kind of the very significant role in the project. He says, well, there's just one problem. Like, I've never done that before. Like, you know, how do you expect me to do that? Well, we'll give you all the technical support you need. It'll be great. He says, okay. So I agreed. We came back, and I started working on that project. There were two problems, challenges. One was the technical support they offered never appeared, so I was really on my own. And I had left that office to go to this little office, so I kind of became the big fish in the little pond. And when I came back, a bunch of people had been my superiors were now, you know, working on my project that I was lead on. That was tough. That was tough for everybody. So it was challenging. And then if all that wasn't challenging enough, I was in Turkey on a business trip. I was back and forth all the time in meetings, and they called me out of the meeting and to tell me that the company had gone broke. My company had gone broke. So that's kind of the way it went. So each step was crazy. It was an opportunity, a challenge, and that I would never have picked for myself. I never was orchestrating these things. It was always just presented, and I believe it was from God. So the bottom line of what I wanted to share is just that if you commit your life to God, if you want an interesting and challenging life, just commit it to God. And you'll be amazed at what He'll do. And I don't think it matters what your occupation is or what your theme in life is. Commit your life to God, and He'll blow it up like you couldn't imagine.